Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to learn how to use JavaScript, which is super exciting. So JavaScript is the world's most popular programming language. It is the programming language of the web, and it is the next logical step for you in your learning journey as it pertains to web development. Until you fully master JavaScript and learn exactly what it can do, and use it to build applications that are meant to be used online, you can't really call yourself a web developer, right? JavaScript is kind of one of these basic fundamental things we need to learn. Now, once you do learn it and master it, you're going to be nearly a full stack developer when it comes to online. You'll have some server-side languages that you need to learn, like Python or PHP, SQL, stuff like that. But for the most part, anything client-side you'll be able to handle. So I'm really excited to get started. Now, because JavaScript is a programming language, it is going to take a bit of a learning curve. There's a bit of a learning curve with programming. Okay, so you're going to have to stick with it, and we'll try to go as slowly as possible in the beginning, and then we'll ramp it up in the end. So let's talk about what JavaScript can do. JavaScript can essentially just change elements on your page. For example, we have a button here. If we click it, it'll show the date and time. It's pretty much, that's JavaScript. JavaScript is pulling the specific date and time out of my computer's settings and popping them right there on the page. So we can change HTML content with JavaScript. So we can change words. We can change specific elements themselves. So let's talk about how this happens. This line of code right here is JavaScript. And essentially what this means is document, meaning I want to talk to the document that I currently reside in, the HTML document I live in, and I want to get a specific element by its ID. Now the ID is like a hashtag, and then, instead of class, we have ID, right? So I want to get an element by its ID. I'm going to get an element called demo. I want to change the HTML of that element, meaning I want to change what's inside, in between the tags of that element. And I want to change it to this. So if we look at how this is actually done in the code, we have an H2 here, says what can JavaScript do. We have a paragraph element here with an ID of demo. And when we change the inner HTML, we're actually changing this stuff right here, the stuff that's inside of the element tags. So then we have a button of type button, and we're running this onClick method, meaning whenever I click on this, we want something to happen. And the thing we want to happen is document.getElement by ID demo. So we're going to find an element on our page that's tagged with a demo ID, which is this. We're going to change the inner HTML to say hello JavaScript. So let's go ahead and try it. Hey, it works. That's fantastic. That's a very basic description of what JavaScript can do. Well, what else can it do? It can change the attribute values of your HTML. Instead of just changing the words in a paragraph element, we can actually change the attributes. For example, we can change the source attribute as it's attached to the image tag. So we can actually change pictures based on button presses. So for this example, we have turn on the light, turn off the light, turn on the light, turn off the light, turn on the light, turn off the light. All we're doing is we're changing the image file that's associated with the source in this image tag. And here's what that actually looks like. So notice we have a button here, and we have a button here, and in the middle we have an image element with the ID of my image. So both of these buttons are doing essentially the same thing. They're looking at the document, they're getting an element by its ID, mainly the element called my image, and they're changing the source of my image to pickbulbon.gif. Pretty easy. Down here it's pickbulboff.gif. And so when I hit this button, it changes to the on picture. And when I hit this button, it changes to the off picture. That's it. It's pretty easy. So JavaScript can also change HTML size or CSS. So we can change like font size, we can change font color, we can change font style, we can change background color, we can change anything we want with a button press with JavaScript. We can hide elements, we can show elements, we can do all kinds of cool stuff. Now, all of the examples I've shown you did not require this script tag yet because they were just buttons were calling specific methods. At a certain point, whenever we get into more in-depth stuff, we might have to write a bunch of JavaScript code on our page, and that is going to go in between these script tags. So if we take a look here. So this paragraph element has nothing in it, but as soon as we run the page, we're going to change it with my first JavaScript, and that's inside script elements. So we're going to get into that in a couple of weeks whenever we start really writing some more comprehensive code. Functions and events. Functions and events are very specific things that we are going to learn later on in the class, but they're very powerful things that we can use, which are, for example, a function is a set of code that whenever you call for that set of code, it will run that entire block of code and then revert back to your main program so that you can run this thing and then go back to the execution of your program. I'll explain all that when we get there. Let's see. JavaScript in the head. You can do script in the head. You can do script in the body. Again, it really doesn't matter where you put this stuff. You can also do an external JavaScript sheet, which we're not gonna worry about for this class. Let's see. Everything's good there. Good. Okay, let's talk about output. So, if we want to write information out to an HTML element, we can use inner HTML. If we want to write into the HTML output we can use document.write. We can also use window.alert, meaning an alert window will pop up, or we can use console.log, which will send a message to our browser console. So using inner HTML, we've done that a couple times at this point. Let's take a look at an example for document.write. Now notice that up here we have an H2, a paragraph, and then we have a script with a document.write that is putting the result of this math operation right onto the window or right into the page itself as a paragraph element. So we can do that as well. Using document.write after an HTML document is loaded will delete all existing HTML. Interesting. So if we go in here and, for example, this is an on-click that's tied to a document.write. If we do it, it'll get rid of everything on the page. Window alert. This one's fun. See that? It's an alert window that just popped up. It says an embedded page on this page says 11. See? It was a window alert that popped up. It's good stuff. Console log, JavaScript print. Okay, that's pretty much it for output. Let's take a look at some statements. Now this is stuff that we're going to get into. Yeah, honestly, today we don't really need. We will talk about all of this stuff. Actually, let's go over it just very quickly, so that way we can be aware of this stuff before we move on. So, a JavaScript program is essentially a list of instructions that are executed by a computer. In most programming languages, these instructions are called statements. So a JavaScript program is just a list of statements that are being performed in a specific order, right? That order is very important. So statements consist of values, operators, expressions, keywords, and comments. Most JavaScript statements are meant to be single executable things, right? So most statements will be just one thing that it does, and then the next statement will be another thing that it wants you to do. Now, JavaScript programs are made up of many, many, many different statements, all executed in the exact order that they're written. Now, there are ways we can jump around our statements and execute one statement over another, but we'll get into those later. Semicolons. Semicolons are incredibly important, especially with JavaScript statements, because at the end of the statement, a semicolon indicates that the statement is over, and we need to move to the next statement. So if you forget semicolons, you might see some errors in your code. White space. So JavaScript ignores white space, just like HTML does. So you can feel free to add white space as you want to kind of separate the sections of your program out and make it a little bit easier to read. Now, JavaScript line length. So the editor that we're using it respects JavaScript line length, and it also wraps text for you. So as you're typing, if the statement gets too long, it'll actually wrap it around to the next line. Sorry, my nose is itchy. And it'll still work, right? This statement right here in JavaScript will still work, even though it's on two different lines. Now, when we get into functions, we're going to talk more about this, but functions utilize these brackets here to indicate that everything inside these brackets belong to the function. We're not going to worry about that right now. And we'll get into more of those keywords as we go. Yeah, we'll talk about this next week when we get into variables. Let's talk very quickly about comments. So if you want to write a little note to yourself in your JavaScript code, you can do this -- or this //, and then anything that's after that will be a comment, meaning it won't be compiled by your browser, but it'll be a little kind of secret note for yourself to remember what it is that you're supposed to be doing with that string of code. You can do multi-line comments as well with a /*, and then you end it with an */. One thing that you can do when it comes to troubleshooting, like for example, if you're trying to run your code and you've got a bunch of lines of code in there, a bunch of statements, and you're not sure where the program is failing, you can put a // in front of a line of code to get rid of that, basically prevent that line from executing, so you can see if that line was maybe the issue. Okay, at this point, I think that's pretty much everything. Sorry, I feel like I got like a hair on my face or something. Anyway, that's pretty much everything that we need for this first project. And again, I didn't want to give you too much to focus on. I know learning programming can feel like you're drinking from a fire hose because it's a lot of stuff coming at you at once. The more we do this, the more we dig into it, the more you're going to become comfortable with how to do this stuff. So don't be a little bit worried if right now it feels strange and it doesn't feel like you're remembering any of this stuff. When we do the project that we're about to do, it's hopefully some of this will click a bit in your brain. Okay, that's it for me, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.